Thanks for listening to the Intersections in Learning and Development cast, a series from the training, learning, and development community. My name is Lisa Crockett, and this cast focuses on forging relationships that foster effective learning, no matter where you start. Whether you design, develop, deliver, support, or consult, and/or all of the above, we hope to provide you with new ideas, inspiration, and connections across the L&D community.
Back to Intersections in Learning. I am Lisa Crockett, and my co-host Monique St. Paul is having a lovely time up in the air on her way back from the Learning Guild conference in Orlando. Lucky Monique. So be kind. I will try to keep up with questions and stuff in the chat, but we all know when I'm flying solo, it can get a little dicey. So hopefully that won't scare our guest. So our guest actually today is Danielle Kayal, and she is the founder and principal of Workshift. Workshift is a boutique consulting and coaching firm specializing in HR and people practices. So Danielle's been in HR for over 15 years, and she started her career in education before that. She spent 10 years in OD and talent development. And we really wanted to talk to her today because the intersection of design thinking and the many the intersections with learning, the subject matter experts, the leaders that she's working with, we really wanted to hear about that within her practice. So I'm going to stop tripping over my tongue, pass the mic to Danielle, and ask her to introduce herself before we dive in with some questions.
Thank you.
Take it away.
Yeah, so trying to think what else to mention. So I have been a career changer a few times, although my career changes have been not necessarily 180s, but more pivots. So I pivoted from before even education. I was in the business field as well as public health for a very short time, and then pivoted to education. And then from education, pivoted to organizational development and learning. And then
nice bridge.
Pivoting. Yeah. So I see life as really a series of definitely a lattice and a series of opportunities. And it's really about just trying to figure out and follow interests and passions and see what sticks.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Actually, I really like that because it is what sticks.
Yeah.
I've done a lot of pivoting too. And I think it's really interesting when you said education to organizational development.
Yeah.
I hear a lot of teachers going from education into learning right now. But can you, when you thought about OD, where did you come at it? How did you come at organizational development as the place you wanted to make the bridge, and was it what you expected?
I had a divine intervention, I think, at the time when I was figuring out what to do next. I literally put my name in a talent pool through recruiting through a temp agency.
Oh my.
And they had matched my skills with an open position in organizational development. So I never even heard of the word or realized what could be. I mean, I just knew that I had transferable skills in instructional design and transferable skills working with people. And so I was purely just a really happy coincidence that was my first foray. So I didn't ask for it, but there's so many different, again, transferable skills in ways that the two things intersect. I mean, I always like to use the joke that I taught high school, and I feel like, everybody in high school just grows up and actually works for your organization. So that even, the issues or the challenges, they're less of the behavioral, maybe the annoying behavioral things that you had dealt with. But at the end of the day, the people have just kind of evolved into adults. And so, it's really it's all about how do you understand people? How do you understand what their motivations are and what their passions are, as well as understanding what the larger business context is and was. And so that was definitely the biggest leap in making the transition, because it was I had worked in business briefly. So I knew the idea of working behind a computer, emails, totally,
all that good stuff.
All that stuff, but really to understand all the different business units and what they brought to the table and what their issues were and how they all connected to the corporate strategy. That was definitely very new to me. And I think I was also fortunate that I am a visual thinker. So if somebody were to show me a map of here's the org chart of the whole company, or here's like what we're trying to do visually, it was easier for me to grasp. So that was just kind of my own way and that's why I think OD stuck with me.
It's like almost like a spider, like as you're saying it, like I'm seeing like a spider web coming right out of it. And it does, because it's almost like if it's done correctly, it's the landing place for that business information to tie those other pieces that are often siloed together. If it's being done right. And that's the biggest challenge. And I don't, right is such a judgmental word, but if it's being done effectively, and that depends on the organization, like you said, the strategy, the culture, how it all comes together. So I don't know if everyone knows the nature of organizational development work, but I think you did a really good job explaining it. When you talk about working with other departments, like where specifically do you touch the most often from an OD perspective?
From a department standpoint, it really depends on the organization. So I would say that from my previous experience, I definitely have worked, probably majority of my work overall has been with HR teams and working with them on things like, we want to roll out a new HRIS system, but we don't know how to do that. Or how do we make sure that when we roll it out, then everyone's going to understand how to use it and what it can do and not be overwhelmed. And I've done some work with a lot of work with onboarding, new hire orientation, and then looking at, where things are from in smaller teams of are the teams functioning right? And are they, is everybody thriving on the team? Is everybody aware of their roles and responsibilities?
That's fascinating work. That's got to be really, do you often do that with different teams inside the same organization, or is it does it sweep through almost like programmatically?
A lot of times it can. It really, again, I think depends on the client, because the client will see the result and be like, all right, we need this to ripple through. We need this to go through the organization. But sometimes it doesn't. I feel like a big part of this work is really about assessing client readiness more than anything. And, are they ready to pause and see, actually acknowledge the different issues? And once they're in the acknowledge phase, that's where it's just right at the tip of the iceberg. It's about okay, are they willing, or do they know how to help themselves out of it? Exactly. So I'd say a lot of the work I do, even though it's, OD is positioned in HR, it's one of those specialty functions that really expands. Doesn't matter how much you know about HR. It's really about understanding and facilitating groups to make decisions and groups to solve problems.
I love that you use the word facilitating, because I think there's often a misunderstanding in the L&D world of, because we talk about it as training. We historically have called people trainers, but the best trainers are facilitators. They're facilitating the information. They are learning the information in order to be able to convey the information at some level, but really listening to the people in the room and saying, what are the questions being asked? What are the questions not being asked?
Yeah,
exactly. And but facilitating, and that's a challenging skill. And I think that like you said, the HR knowledge, you don't need it. Is it helpful? It can be. You're going to pick it up over time anyway, because if that's where you're sitting, you're just going to. So certainly it's helpful to understand those things, but it's more helpful to understand people. I love what you said earlier about being a high school teacher and moving. It was like you're moving from one organization to another. We do that our whole lives. It doesn't matter what the organization is. It could be a ski team. Doesn't matter, but it's always a group. And once you get a group of people together, the bigger the group, the more complex it becomes. And it's fun. It's like a big puzzle, and it's
Oh
also
my gosh,
hard.
totally. You were stealing my thunder for one of my guilty pleasures.
Okay. All right. We're going to get there because, oh, wow. It makes me wonder, and I'm going to ask you later what you think. Hopefully I'll remember the question, but I'm going to keep going on the
Yeah,
meat.
no problem.
So what is your best advice to anyone who wants to get into a career in OD, HR, and maybe specifically having come from education? What do you wish someone had told you in the beginning?
I would say probably the biggest advice would be certainly like talk to people in the field before you make the move, and try to get some firsthand knowledge and perspective of, okay, what are the books that I need to read? What are the what is this all about? Like, to give you an overview, one of the books that really helped me was The Fifth Discipline, which is by Peter Senge, and it's all about the idea of systems thinking.
Okay, I'm putting this in the chat, not the link.
Is very much understanding systems, understanding, okay, how, like, let's say if you're doing a training, how does the training not just affect the learners in your classroom, but does it have an effect on other people in the system? And again, everything in an organization, should go back to its mission and its strategy. So I think it's just really learning to think about things holistically and on a bigger scale.
Yeah, how does it tie together?
Yeah, talking to people is really helpful, and really it depends on individual readiness. I mean, there's plenty of master's programs and plenty of some people start OD by going into change management first. It really depends on what's calling you, and what's where are you in terms of pursuing an informal path or a formal path.
Yeah, it makes sense. I came at it from project management and HR, and those two things kind of fell together in a way where I was like, oh, okay. It wasn't called OD at the time. It was called organizational effectiveness. I am that old, but still. And it's probably the most fun I've had at work. I love doing instructional design work, and I love the changes in it. But OD work is amazing because you dig deep into how people behave and how people respond. And you learn so much about yourself through that lens, because you have to. You have to know your triggers and all of those things in order to help them navigate it. And it's just I don't know how to say how rewarding it can be.
Yeah, I'm glad you brought that up, and also glad you brought it up around the triggers, because this is where I've seen a topic that is used a lot now, is talking about unconscious bias. Let's do unconscious bias training, conscious bias training. And if somebody in this field doesn't really understand what unconscious bias they have, and where their points are, it could be it's really hard to learn.
It is. And you don't know where, I look back at all of the I've been in a lot of leadership development programs over the years. I've developed them, I've been party to them, all of these different things. And when I think back to some of the exercises and things that were done over the last more than a decade of being involved in these things, they scare me a little bit. They scare me a lot. And when I think about the fact that what I didn't know way back, and what I've learned over time about the harm that can be done by some of these things that are meant to, I don't want to get deep and judgy about it, but being careful about what you do in a room where you have all different individuals from all different cultures. Like you're saying, you don't know where you might hit a hot button. Something as simple as, I think I remember seeing this on LinkedIn, someone saying that someone was using a lot of Harry Potter references in, as a sort of aside in a training, like, it's like magic, and they were using like spells and things like that. And this person was like, it made them extremely uncomfortable in their religion. This is not something to be taken lightly. This is not something that, it's, and I was like, wow, I know that person was not thinking about that and was not trying, they thought it was a cute and light way to explain something that everybody thinks is magic that wasn't magic, whatever it was. But being so careful, and that's a light compared to some of the things I've seen done in a classroom with, 2 or 3 dozen people really, and some people taking things very seriously and sharing things probably would have been best not to be shared. it's a hard thing.
Absolutely.
Yeah, yeah. So bringing us sort of back to clients and doing the work. When you bring in a new client, how do you scope your work? I know that that's a challenge for a lot of folks that
Yeah.
listen to the cast.
Yeah, I would say it usually comes about because of a symptom. So something isn't working, there's pain, there's, we have to do something better. So it always starts with the symptoms. And then I think from there, it's realizing, okay, well, what is the impact that this problem has right now? Is it like, I have to fix it tomorrow, or the organization's going to combust, or is it something that like, we need to get done, but we're okay. And then it's looking at who else is involved. So how, how pervasive is it? Is it like I have if I have an organization of 5 people, is very different than I have an organization of 500 people.
Yes.
And then looking at the biggest thing is data. And this is, it's really hard to see like, okay, what data do you have and what data do you still need? Because that can influence the scope of the project. Because I always like to start with, how do you know it's true? Or how do you know, what evidence do you have about this? And if they don't really have evidence, then, my approach is really to either interview people or send some sort of survey around or some way to kind of gauge how deep it is. And then I think from there it's okay, here's what I think, and here's what I propose. I also have learned that, and it's maybe more my personality than like the science of OD, is like offer people options.
Oh, yes.
Making sure that whatever your next step is or your solution is still agile and still flexible, because clients may not be ready. So I think the more that you're prepared with, okay, well, if they don't want this, they don't want to do interviews with everybody, then do we have to pivot? Does the buck stop there? Or can you do, what's another way to do that? Do you do a group interview? Do you do a group something to collect that information?
Oh, for sure. I mean, I know the IDs out there run into this in their needs analysis and their learner analysis and wanting to merge, personally wanting to merge the learning experience design into instructional design. So more of that, what's the user experience, wanting to talk to that end user and learner. That can be a big challenge. And I know in OD programs, it's the same way. And it's not, sometimes it's a gating issue or a cultural issue, but other times it's these people are on the road, they're on the floor, they're not available. This is a fast-paced environment. They're not trying to be difficult or challenging. It's just, if I tag along for a day is sometimes a great thing to try to do. But some organizations, well, if you're internal, I would imagine that's a lot easier. As a consultant, personally, it's not something that most people want to do, especially if it's a confidential environment or a medical environment.
Yeah, exactly. And that's what I found even with, starting to incorporate design thinking and design thinking principles, because it does really start with, the empathy of, okay, what is the user experiencing, and what it could be. But I think the biggest benefit is, how do you get the entire system in the room as much as possible? How do you get everybody's voice heard and really engage in a process that brings forth ideas and surfaces issues, and then actually connects the dots together, instead of me saying, okay, it's this, and this. But, through that type of experience, you can really help the team look at themselves and get a lot of great information in a short period of time.
Oh, I just love that you said that. It's the hardest thing to get done. And I can imagine folks listening, saying, well, that sounds great, but there's always that but without the buy-in, without all those voices, you could have the right answer. We used to say that on one of the teams I was on, we'd be like, gosh, it's just not that hard. But here's the thing, the answer shouldn't be hard. The answer is probably relatively simple, but if everyone doesn't come to it, it doesn't matter. You're not a doctor. We're not doctors. We're not writing prescriptions that are absolutely going to cure this issue. Folks need to get there and be bought in before you get started. Otherwise, you're just throwing your money out the window. But hard hard thing to sell. It's because it's time.
Yes.
And it's, but we can do it.
Yeah. And I find that a lot of times, someone will go in with an issue that appears to be learning, and we'll go, okay, we'll start at learning. I'll bring up other things that are related to learning that should be, part of the system. But, ultimately sometimes having that first learning experience or learning initiative go well or go one way, builds up the trust and credibility needed to do the deeper systems work.
Really? I mean, I don't think you can ever, let's say, sell something like coaching. Yeah. And I don't mean sell, but I mean, like, get people to understand the importance of maybe coaching, because you can develop a leadership development program and it might solve 50% of your problem, 60 even. I mean, but there are certain folks that are going to have more challenges with it for all different reasons, not because they're lazy or they're mean or they're bad people. It's just that they need something different. And I'm not using learning styles because I don't believe in learning styles personally, but it's the idea of some people need more or different reinforcement because they're bringing different things to the table. They've come from a different place. Maybe they're from a different country. Maybe they've grown up in a different culture. Maybe they've just had a different experience coming into it than other people there. And it's not one size fits all. It can be one size fits many.
Yes. Yeah. Right? Absolutely.
It's hard work. And it's funny because this is where the intersection for me of OD working with the people who are creating or bringing to fruition the ideas that you're designing on learning come in, and being hand in hand with the OD team or the folks that are doing the analysis you're talking about, if it's not OD, but maybe it's an HR person, I think has been the thing that for me has made it easier to develop what I need to develop.
Absolutely. Yeah. Because you're limiting the confusion, the telephone game. You're looking at the problem together. You're able. I love this concept of riffing off someone else, of just being able to have a thought partner and
oh God, yes,
and come up with different ideas, because it's so easy to be. It's not necessarily tunnel vision. Yeah, it's not. I mean, it's just like these unconscious blinders that just kind of come up.
You don't know.
Realize. You're like, oh, why didn't I think of that? But that other person that had the different perspective is going to give you so much more insight of could this work?
Exactly. Or does it make sense? Is it intuitive? Because everything we create at the end of the day should be intuitive.
Yeah.
And if it's not simple, I always ask the person that I know is going to blow it up.
Yeah.
I have Monique review my presentations and she always blows them up. And I'm like, but it's the things that you need to know, that someone who isn't in the space that you're in, doesn't know about what you're talking about, is going to say, well, I don't understand why that was there. And that didn't make sense. And you realize this is out of order, or I didn't explain this because you have this tacit knowledge. And that's the simple stuff. Forget about the bias and the things that you just, you're just not representing. People who do animation software rarely have overweight characters. If you notice, what is that about? Like, people are all sorts of different sizes, and and that's something that people don't talk about inside organizations. And that's an easy one compared to the stuff I'm not talking about right now.
Yeah. Cool. Could I ask you a question about the term you use about blowing up? Because I think that's what's your connotation of blowing up? Is it a good thing, or it sounded like it was a bad thing?
No, I see blowing up as meaning it, and that again probably shows my age, as a bad thing.
Okay.
Yeah,
I think
could
what's
be good.
Yeah, not to so you might see it as a bad thing, but I think another big lesson I've learned when I've done ID work and OD work is that that's a beautiful moment. Like, that's an aha learning moment.
It can be.
Yeah, and it also could be an ego defying moment, or all right, I'm going to go right down there.
With the ship.
Yeah, but it's also acknowledging, though, that this type of work, it can be deeply personal, but it's also, again, like checking where you are, and what can you learn from the situation. You might have learned, okay, I'm talking to a different audience. They picked up on these sort of things. Okay, that might have been my blind spot.
Mhm.
And so I guess, I think that's, we talk about like blowing up and or, things happening catastrophically and, ending momentum or scrapping the project. But I think one thing that's kept me doing this work is trying to check my ego as much as possible and realize like,
Mhm.
okay, that's criticism. Got it. Okay, that hurts.
Push through that.
But like,
How do you handle that in a client situation when, and I think that's where my bias in this area, frankly,
yeah,
comes from, is how do you handle it when the client can't handle it,
yeah,
whatever that thing was that happened, and they're kind of going down that road of,
yeah,
whatever was done, whatever, that person's gone. This is that, instead of how do we constructively see if this is
yeah,
salvageable?
yeah. I would say, first of all, it's always about, is the client ready to receive the information, and kind of prepping
Yeah.
them for like, okay, we're going to collect this information about this and that, or we're going to show you what we've done or what we've designed so far.
Right.
And then really kind of talk through what's the best way to go through that. Like, do they need time to think about it? Okay, well, let's come back in a week. Or let's actually look at, just a small piece of the pie, versus,
I like that.
versus the whole thing.
Right.
I think one thing I've learned is that try not, and this is, it goes both ways. Like, some people want the data beforehand, like all of it, so they can kind of digest it before you review it with them in person.
Yes.
And some people prefer it. I personally like to do it together, because this way you can get at the resistance. You can say,
Mhm.
oh my gosh, was that an aha moment, or was that an oh shit moment? And kind of gauge them and coach them
Exactly.
through that.
Yes.
So I mean, I'd say like it really, the resistance really just depends on the client.
Yeah. And
Um,
maybe you wouldn't, in the beginning, go as deep with a client where you felt the resistance up front,
yeah, yeah,
right? It's that, okay, well, we'll put out a survey
yeah,
and let's just see what happens from that and go from there.
yeah.
Oh my gosh, we're
I know,
almost up at
too.
the half hour. Oh my goodness. I know, I'm looking at all the questions. I'm like, wait, we've got to get to some of these. Let's see, what's a really good one? If you had any skill right now to do your current job that you don't have, what would it be and why?
I would definitely say it would go to statistical analysis and data analysis. I think I'm comfortable with collecting data. I'm comfortable looking at
Mhm.
themes, but for really looking at, comparative ratios and doing a lot of the work that I know is done in marketing, or and done in
Mhm.
other finance and other units, that's something that I'd like to learn.
What are the KPIs of OD? That would be, I
Yeah,
would read that book. I would read that.
totally.
Um, and what are the KPIs and how do you analyze them? I would read that book.
Yeah.
Um, let's we'll segue into some of the more fun questions as we're closing up. Do you have a favorite mantra or quote that you live by?
Yeah, I would say one that I keep coming back to is to be the change that you want to see. I can't remember who said
Mm.
that exactly, but definitely not me. But it's worked for me,
Well,
and
you did today.
I think it's just all about, like, it's easy to come from a place of like, oh, of blame. It's the other person's fault. I'm the victim. All of
We've
this
all
is
been there.
yeah. And so when I
You
think
know,
about that statement, it's about like, um, just get on the, take responsibility,
yeah,
and be, kind of be in charge, and be a leader by doing something that you want to see other people do.
I like that. I like that. I think we can all do that.
Yeah.
We can all try to do that. Okay. I think we're gonna jump into. Are you ready for the speed round? I know you've heard tell about our speed round. We'll try to
Yeah,
keep it easy. What's the
sure.
last song you listened to, Danielle?
So last song was a song by John Batiste. He was the winner of I think this year's Grammy Record of the Year, and it's all right.
It's all right. Yeah,
Yeah,
that's a good
yeah,
song.
yeah. I think
I,
it's yeah. So
cool.
that
What
was
about the last book that you read?
I have a great habit of buying books but not reading them from start to finish. So the last book chapters I read came from a book called Changing on the Job, Developing Leaders for a Complex World.
And why only the chapters?
Well, I mean, the chapters, it depends on how much, if I, again, this is like my own internal philosophy of keep going with something as much as it like fulfills you or like is interesting.
What's the ROI on this? That's where I'm going to stop.
Yeah. So, I mean, I start from the beginning, although, sometimes I will start a book from the end, depending on what kind of book it is.
Ooh, I like that.
But I do start from the beginning, and then I say, okay, does this chapter want me to go to the next chapter? Does this, and what am I learning? And also it's the absorption factor. There's so much content now that like, I'd rather just like have like, it's like a cup of tea, I just want to have a cup of tea and sip on this chapter. And then when I want another cup or one other sip, I'll go back and read the other chapter.
I'm going to let you inspire me. I'm going to beg you to inspire me. I'm going to keep telling myself that, because I have this thing where I pick up a book and if I don't finish it, I feel bad about myself. Even if it's not, I can't read it, but I'm going to try to break away from that, because I also think you're right. And you can get something from anything. You can learn something, but that doesn't mean you have to take the whole thing in necessarily.
Yeah.
On that note, I'll just move on to the next question. What would you say is your guilty pleasure?
Definitely jigsaw puzzles.
Ooh.
So I know it's a little bit, oh yeah, I do that.
I love them.
Totally.
Love them.
Whatever. I'm not going to even talk about, the age thing. But the idea, a puzzle for me, it's tactile. It like gets at my visual systems thinking, and it kind of just takes me out of my head. But yet also feeling useful, like, oh yeah, I'm doing something.
I'm gonna have something at the end. Have you ever tried an online crossword, or not crossword, I'm sorry, an online jigsaw?
I have. Fascinating.
They're totally fascinating. I actually put one on my website the other day,
cool.
And I'll actually send you a link to it, because it's a lot of fun. Nice. It's a huge sunflower, but I was like, I really want to have something here that's interactive and fun, and I love playing in it. I really do. It's a good break when you're having a challenge in a day and you just take 10 minutes and you solve something.
Yeah.
It's not, I love it. I love it.
Piece has different, different holes, and you're like, okay, what needs to be solved? And it doesn't really matter where you start, which is the best.
Totally. I wonder if this is a common, and I'd love to I think I need to put a survey out there to OD and also instructional design folks. I'm so curious if this is a thing for us. Because so much of the work we do is really putting the disparate pieces together and trying to figure out how they fit and what's not quite fitting. And I think it makes so much sense. Okay. My favorite question, everybody that listens to the cast knows this one is my favorite. Could your partner or your best friend accurately describe what you do for a living?
Absolutely not.
I love that. Okay, so now I think we're at, this is broadcast 12 and only 2 people so far, I believe, maybe 3, I could be off. I'm going to check back on that before the next cast. Yeah, everybody says the same thing. My husband could not tell you. I remember one day he said something with coaching, and I laughed so hard. I was like, okay.
That's great.
Hey, here's my business card.
I find I don't like to talk about work when I'm not working. So
it's enough.
I just don't talk about it. And so they have no idea what I'm doing.
What do you do all day? Well,
Yeah.
Thank you so much for coming and being with us today, Danielle. I know Monique missed you, but I feel so treated that I was able to talk to you today. And I'd love to get some time offline to talk about puzzles and things.
Likewise.
So we'll do some offline. Oh, and let me, I've been such a bad, not host, but a bad chat person that I did not put your LinkedIn. If you guys want to hook up with Danielle, her LinkedIn is now in our chat, and she is Danielle Kayal, Kayal in LinkedIn. And she got her full name, which is awesome. So it'll be easy to find her. And that was for the folks that are listening in.
Fabulous.
And in terms of guys, thank you all for coming back again today and listening to us. We will be announcing our next guest very shortly, so just be on the lookout for that. And if you're interested, please join TLDC. This is a great network. You'll meet some phenomenal people like Danielle, Monique, myself, and all the wonderful people that we see in all of the great events. And we do have an event at the end of the week, so I want to promote that. We are talking about e-learning tools Thursday and Friday, and there's a huge panel of speakers. I get to talk about Articulate Rise, so I'm psyched about that. But I actually can't wait to hear some of the other folks that are going to be talking, because we're going to have tool overload, and that just gets right to my geek. So everyone have a wonderful rest of your day. And if you're interested, by the way, in being part of the broadcast or being a guest, check us out at intersectionsinlearning@gmail.com. Just drop us a note, and we would love to talk to you and have you on with us. Have a great rest of the day, everyone.
Bye-bye. Thank you.
Bye. Thanks, Danielle.
Bye.
Thanks again for listening, and if you find value in our content, please consider supporting TLDC with a membership. Go to the tlbc.com/join to sign up and get access to hundreds of our recorded videos, free entry to all of our live and virtual conferences and events, and much more. Your support helps us continue to build community and share valuable resources for L&D professionals around the world.